Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Temko and this is Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. Published by Citrine and developed by Black Lab, it is a space tactics game set in the Battlestar Galactica universe. It's turn-based, point-based, and most of all, very cool. The goal is, of course, to fight on a battlefield, make tactical decisions where your ship should go and what they should do, and based on that, sort of try to defeat the ever-evil Cylons. Unless, of course, you're playing as the Cylons in skirmish or multiplayer modes. Before we dive into gameplay proper, I do want to take a look at the options and settings. As always, there are timestamps where you can skip on ahead to the gameplay if you are not so inclined, but it is fairly interesting and very important, as always, to take a look at the PC options when reviewing a PC title. Options wise, we have volume for sound, music, and voice. Overall pretty complete. There aren't any real other sounds you need to worry about, but I would suggest playing around with these three volume sliders to get the best balance for your preferred gameplay. The default setting is a little bit loud in all regards to my ears. Camera controls for zoom, rotation, pan speed. Overall, I would put pan speed very high because it is annoyingly slow by default, and other than that, they are as you'd expect them to be. You have mouse scrolling at the edge of the screen, inverting zoom and inverting pitch. Pretty straightforward, as well as along the UI in simulation mode, which is fairly welcome, subtitles, and as well as combat notifications on screen. Pretty good, 5 languages. And then we have graphical options where I do put a little bit of a damper on things. It looked good so far with pretty decent range of options for a fairly stylistic title, but the graphical options are rudimentary at best and, well, lacking in all regards. The presets of low to ultra are exactly that, just presets. With resolution options available, it still feels very lacking. Full screen on or off, but even full screen isn't true full screen, it's full screen windowed, not the greatest. And even if you put the thing on custom, the only additional options you have is texture quality, model quality, as well as VSync, which is not that great. The game is 3D rendered, even if it is more of a zoomed out stylistic plane of combat and space, but that doesn't mean that graphical options are not necessary. I would have liked to have the option for higher resolution models because the game already doesn't look fantastic from a visual fidelity perspective, but more than that, I would have liked more effects, more AA, more post-processing, more of everything, and it's not in here. Neither is it available nor is it customizable, which is a tremendous shame. Not the greatest. What is pretty decent is the availability of rebindable keys. Overall, the game is pretty good to control with the mouse, but you do have shortcuts for all the usual quick actions, which mostly if you're going to play this game a lot, I would definitely take some time to learn some of these various hotkeys. They will save you a ton of time, especially multiplayer mode where there is a timed mode for the turns. Before I dive into the various different campaign as well as skirmish and multiplayer gameplay aspects, I do want to touch on what the game offers. And the game has a campaign which is fairly straightforward, where you fly around with your mobile spaceport and build ships while trying to defeat the Cylons, and there's a variety of missions. And slowly the game introduces you to various concepts about the game mechanics and game ships and game depth and technology, so I would strongly suggest playing the campaign before diving into skirmish against the AI or multiplayer. The interesting thing is that multiplayer also has the option of going co-op against the AI, which is a nice little addition that you don't often see. But more than anything though, the important thing to note regarding both skirmish matches as well as PvP matches is that the fleet point limit is only 4,000 or 8,000 points, and this is definitely an issue I will dive into in gameplay. The second thing is that it's something you either like or very much dislike, is that this game does not have the Citrine play-by-email method for turn-based games that they normally use. It has a timer-based turn-based system, which is fairly straightforward. Many games use this, but it is something you either have to like or dislike. Having said all of that about everything related to the gameplay, let's go ahead and dive into the gameplay and talk about everything from gameplay performance, mechanics, as well as overall depth and complexity. So diving into gameplay, what I'll be showing you is a skirmish match, which is just a random match against the AI I set up at 8,000 points with my army as well as his. Now, by no means am I very good at the game, so from a tactical standpoint, I'm probably making quite a few wrong decisions. And that is part of the parcel I would like to talk about, because diving into gameplay, there are two main components you have to balance within Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. The most primary part is during the campaign, as well as during skirmishes and as well as online matches, you are always fighting with a preset number of units, and these units don't regenerate shielding or hull or any form of defense that they have. And while some components such as navigation or fire control, you can see on the right side of the screen when a ship is selected, can be repaired while in the battle, any damage sustained to any of the armor, which is left, right, front, rear, top, or bottom, is permanent for that battle. Now, the biggest part about this game is that it is turn-based, but it's not just that it is turn-based and thus allows for methodical planning and execution of each action. The turns are executed simultaneously, so while you plan your actions, so is your opponent doing it on his or her end. And this means that if you're making any actions, just taking a corrective left turn or trying to reposition your ship so it's taking hits on its armored side or its more defensive side or anything similar to that, then your opponent is doing the same thing probably, and you do get this cat and mouse game of positioning and repositioning ships. Now, each ship moves in a variety of different directions, and based on the ship hull and ship size, these can be limited to a very short range or a much larger range with smaller and faster ships. This means maneuverability, this means repositioning capabilities, but obviously traded off against better hull strength, longer range weapons, or a larger attack radius. For example, the smallest ship I have, which is a Manticore, is a ship that only has about 30 hull on all of its sides, except its front as well as top, where it has 45. It deals very limited damage and only in a conal area in front of it. And various different ships that I have available, such as the Minotaur or my Adamant, all of these ships have different attack ranges and different functionalities. Issue I have with this game is that most of these you learn through trial and error. The game isn't really that great at explaining itself, and most of the time while you're in the match, unless you imminently know from the top of your head what each radius and ranges of each ship, you do end up having to double check and triple check whether or not attacking or repositioning or moving to a certain location is going to be useful to you during that turn, and this takes up a lot of extra time. And as I mentioned earlier, the addition of the time-based turn cycle, which keeps everything moving in a sort of normal flow, does mean that you need to know from the top of your head the basic area, range, and sort of conal shape of the attack your ships are doing. And as these are different for each ship type, that, especially if you're a newer player, is quite a challenge. Now, obviously, there are ways to look at certain things and know all these conal areas and know how to focus on a specific enemy and all of these extra things. And while the game's initial campaign missions that also serve as a tutorial do explain this quite well, especially later stages or more advanced functionality that you have to keep checking back on is very badly accessible. And this is the crux of this game. From a mechanical complexity and tactical depth, it is very complete. The addition of just having top and bottom shielding allows for a whole different range of tactics. You can position ships one over the other, allowing for a literal defensive shield, protecting your more vulnerable ships by literally hovering a massive, bulky Battlestar class ship above it. And that is a very cool tactic. On the other hand, you can also crash ships into one another and then have both of them blow up in your face. That too is a very real possibility. There is collision detection. But the problem that you have to recheck and reposition every ship individually, regardless of how they move and remove, you do end up with a very annoying issue, is that you're wasting a lot of time in submenus. For example, if you want to move a ship, you have to click on the shadow in front of the ship, the green and gray lighted areas during your turn's planning phase. And while that's fairly easy during the initial stage of the map, especially later down when you'll have a much more condensed fight and ships are flying one over the other and there's explosions on screen and fighters have been scrambled from the bigger carrier ships, and there's all these little extra things on screen, you're gonna have to move in, pan the screen just to get a good lock on a silhouette of a ship so you can move it forward. And then you have the secondary functionality, such as boosting hull defenses using the thrusters, or rechanging the way the ship fires at an opponent. Do you want to focus fire with all your batteries on a specific ship? Do you want to target the closest enemy? All these ships can be changed and configured every single turn, and you need to, especially if you want to play at the best possible ability that you can. But because each of these actions is locked behind a submenu behind the ship, you end up spending a lot of time clicking, waiting, and loading interfaces just to double check a number. A good example is the missile batteries and missile bays. I have two ships here that are specifically designed as missile carriers. And every time I want to fire a missile, I have to go in that ship's submenu, which is either the right mouse button or while focused on them, the spacebar, then select munitions, and then select the battery I want to use to fire a missile, then select the target out of all the available targets in range, then redo that for the second missile battery all over again. And if I want to know how much recharge time there is, or whether or not there is reload time on certain ships, because these differ per ship as well as ship type, again, very cool from my tactics and a complexity and depth perspective in terms of mechanics, I again have to go through that entire list of menus, which is fairly annoying, frustrating, because on one end you have a very clear, cool, and imminently visible and understandable layout of the battlefield. If you look at the battlefield from a visual as well as technically mechanical perspective, you see different ships being on different planes, and if you pan the camera around, you can see them being on different planes. And when you move your ship, you first move in the direction you want, and then you can pan the ship up or down, having them change the altitude they're sort of fighting on. And this is very cool. But if you have a ship that only has side batteries with a conal shape to the side and doesn't have forward facing guns like I have in one of my ships, then in that case, if I just want to make sure that my ship is in range to attack something, I have to right click that ship, select turrets, and then see the conal area of the turrets, and then decide if I want to focus on something, then pull out again just to select new ship to see if I have to reposition again. After repositioning that ship, I have to recheck it. There is a lot of extra clicks and interface work diving into submenus and submenus to get the information you need to make a snap decision. Do I go left or do I go right? Whereas certain other information, such as how damaged your hull area is, whether or not a ship is being battered from the rear or the front or even the left or right side and you need to pan them around, these things are imminently available from the overview menu. So it is really a balance of the UI being very useful in one part of the experience, which is mostly movement and overview, and then being clunky and annoying in another part, which is the more detailed fine-tuned control of repositioning ships. And while this is a turn-based game, and in the single player as well as the skirmish mode where you're facing an AI, there is no turn limit. As soon as you take to the online multiplayer, there is a time limit on each turn, and if you have a larger battle of about 8,000 points, that can end up being a very short amount of time to make all your turn decisions based on the information you need to process and analyze to do these various things. So that is my biggest gripe with the game, and that is a fairly simple one. This is something that can be fixed. A patch improving the UI is not out of the ordinary for many games. So what does the game then do very well? And I've already touched upon how the game's combat interaction and combat complexity is so very good, and that is definitely the highest strength of the title. Last year, we had a similar title to this come out in the Warhammer 40k universe, and that title had a couple of issues with repositioning and special abilities just firing off slightly too fast to be useful for interception, and various movement and reposition tactics just didn't give the feedback you expect them to. Still a very good game, but it did have those flaws. Battlestar Galactica Deadlock does not have any of those flaws, and that is because the game is turn-based as opposed to real-time. Positioning, repositioning, planning ahead, and all these other things you can do to create this rich and deep tactical gameplay, including just double checking how much hull something has, whether or not a certain area is undefended. Can I flank it in that area? Can I reposition another ship to sort of push it in the general direction of maybe my squadrons of fighters, or maybe I have something else going on and I can get my ships in range that way? Do I need to have them break apart and in some other way use that? All these decisions that you can change on a turn-to-turn basis on top of all the various different mechanics, and layer upon layer of these choices makes this game's tactical depth extremely well put together. It is a very solid space tactics turn-based game, but the UI does require some getting used to and does require a bunch of superfluous clicks to get to the information you want. So it is a little bit of a damper on an otherwise excellent system. Really enjoy it. But gameplay mechanics are the core of what you're doing, and gameplay battles between the campaign as well as single player and multiplayer matches against the AI are always coupled with visuals. And here I do have a couple of nitpicks. Most of the game's visuals are pretty good if we take into account that this is the Battlestar Galactica universe. It's all edges and grays and dark colors, and there is very little happiness here in this universe, from what I know about Battlestar Galactica. And the game does emulate that art style and the visual style of the show quite well. But it also doesn't take it any step or inch further than that. What I mean by that is the visual fidelity of the maps you're fighting in is limited. Yes, there is a couple of asteroids floating around, but I've never actually cared about them. I've generally ignored them. Even areas with bigger asteroids in the middle of the field don't really feel like an obstruction. They're a backdrop. They don't matter. And I would have much liked to see maps, visually as well as mechanically, be more engaging and interesting to form and shape the battlefield. As it stands, with only 4 maps available in the multiplayer, and while there are more maps available in the single player, you don't get to play those in multiplayer, they are all basically recolors with a different backdrop, just sort of there to make up for the fact that this isn't a blank black screen. But for all intents and purposes, it might as well be. Thankfully, it's not, and the visuals are pretty nice, but they're not amazing in any stretch of the imagination. Ships always feel a little bit low poly, they feel edge, their effects are always a little bit muted, animations including banking and explosions don't feel high quality. It feels from every angle like the visuals were the last in line to get any development attention or budget, and that really does show. A mechanically very strong title, the game suffers in its visual department, and this includes the audio that delivers with it. While the voiceovers are overall pretty decent, audio delivery in general in terms of guns, in terms of impacts, in terms of massive explosions. Yes, space doesn't have explosions. The game does, because it's more fun to hear a massive explosion, aren't really that massive. They're just sort of a wishy-washy pop like fireworks going off, and not a big massive hulking Battlestar class ship imploding in on itself under a barrage of missiles and ballistic pounding it from every angle. And that is a damper, because when you blow up a big enemy ship, you sort of want to feel like you blew up a big enemy ship. So you do have to weigh it against Battlestar Galactica's Deadlock overall strengths. If you enjoy space battles, if you enjoy deep, rich tactical games that provide tons of replay value, tons of strategic depth, tons of competitive strength overall, then this game will offer you that exactly. It allows you to fine-tune each turn, for each ship, for each movement, and in each moment. All of this is affected by damage to your navigations and engineering and tech base. All of this can be affected by hacks and ships harrying your flanks, and whether or not you have flak available to counter enemy missiles. And every step of the way, the systems in this game layer one over the other, allowing deep, rich tactical gameplay. But on the other hand, you do end up with explosions that sound like fireworks going off and not Battlestar-sized ships being ripped apart in the empty void of space. Another feature this game does offer outside of the overall multiplayer and extra skirmish modes in the campaign, which has progression and unlocking and a solid story, and though I can't really speak for the depth and complexity of the story in terms of its lore cohesion to Battlestar Galactica, I'm not familiar enough with the universe of Battlestar Galactica to make that judgment, I personally really did enjoy the campaign and overall progression of the story and choices you had to make in the game to progress from that point onward. But the most interesting part of this game is the instant replay system. Once you finish a skirmish or you finish a battle overall, you can click the instant replay button and be shown a 3D sort of highlight reel of what happened in the battle. And this is a pretty cool feature because you just spent 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes on a big ass battle, fighting left and fighting right and blowing up ships and making positions and maneuvers and everything related to that. And by the end, win or lose, you can see a highlight reel of what happened. So you see your ships teleporting in, you see missile salvos going off, you see impacts, bullets, you see different movements and different attacks coming in, you see your ships flanking other ships, big gun batteries going off, ships exploding. It feels like a truly epic space opera taking place in front of you, and you orchestrated that space opera, and then you got blown up to smithereens, probably. So in conclusion, Battlestar Galactica Deadlock is overall a very enjoyable space ship battle fighting tactics title. Turn-based combat allows for a much more methodical and controlled gameplay experience, and the depth and complexity of the gameplay mechanics allows for a deep, rich, competitive environment with lots of tactical options. The visuals lagging behind that don't really feel amazing to myself personally, and the UI is hit and miss based on the actions and the activities you want to do. Some information is hidden and annoying to reach, other is imminently available and always useful to have. The game's overall feature set is fairly limited in only having 4 multiplayer maps and only really having 2 multiplayer modes, co-op versus AI or PvP. And even there, the map limitations as well as the turn limitations are overshadowed by the fact that the only point multipliers are the 4,000 or 8,000 points for your army. There is no way to create a custom map with you and your friends saying, let's have a 100,000 army point battle between the two of us. The game just doesn't allow for that, and that too is a big damper. The 4,000 and 8,000 point battles are fun in and of themselves, but I would like to see this change and allow for more diversity and more control to the player in how they want to turn and bash armies against one another. Battlestar Galactica Deadlock is coming to PC on August 31st, and you can check it out with the link in the description over on Steam if you are so inclined. So thank you for watching. If you liked this video, press that like button down below. If you didn't, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose. And leave a comment. Tell us what you think about Battlestar Galactica in general. Give us your thoughts and opinions down below. So thank you for watching, and until next time, right here on GuyLogicGaming.